Hello, girls. This is CardioVascular. Um, Let me, oops, put it on full screen. Okay, this is first just a definition of certain key terms. So arteries are always moving away from the heart. So notice these bright red ones moving away from the heart towards all the body parts. And it's bright red because the blood is oxygenated. And veins, on the other hand, all the blue vessels moving towards the heart with deoxygenated blood. There's one exception to this, but that on the great majority of the blood vessels in the body, this categorization works. And because there's the deoxygenated blood, there's also the presence of the waste product CO2, which is being brought to the heart. The capillaries are the smallest blood vessels of all. All arteries will eventually get smaller and smaller as they travel further from the heart. Let's think about an artery going to, I don't know, a leg muscle or toe. It's going to get smaller blood vessel, and maybe if it's going to a muscle in your foot, it's going to branch out even smaller and then become a capillary. Capillary is the tiniest blood vessel, and what's important about it is that the walls are really thin so that oxygen and CO2 can diffuse across the walls of that capillary and reach the tissues that need oxygen. And CO2 will diffuse the other way, entering the blood to get rid of the waste product, CO2. Okay, so just looking at this, can you remember the direction? In this blue blood vessel, where is blood going? Towards the heart, returning with CO2. In this red blood vessel here, where is blood going? It's going away from the heart towards the tissues that it is nourishing. Okay, quick comment about blue and red. Blue is really symbolic. In actuality, deoxygenated blood is dark red, not blue. Sometimes they say it's a purplish red. And oxygenated blood is bright red. How this gets to be so exaggerated to become blue and red is just because it makes the diagrams really convenient and really easy to read. Okay, the one last comment. The blood vessels in your wrist look bluish, but that's because of the tissue that is the blood vessel wall, not the actual color of the blood. That's what I've understood by reading. Okay, so starts to get a little bit confusing. There's two circuits. You could think of a circuit as a loop. There's two loops from the heart. Pulmonary means of the lungs. You might know the Spanish or Italian word for lungs. Pulmoni in Italian, something very similar in Spanish, I don't know what. So let's look at that circuit first. That circuit is full of blue blood that's already been to the body and already given off its oxygen, given away its oxygen. And that's why it's deoxygenated. It's blue. And what does that blue blood do? Travels out of the heart and goes to the lungs. Of course, these represent capillary beds, but there isn't one massive capillary bed in the lung. As you know, you might remember, there's actually millions of capillary beds in the lungs. Each alveoli is covered with capillary beds. I lost my cursor. There it is. Okay, so travels to the lungs where throughout the lungs, the blood is oxygenated. It picks up oxygen and therefore becomes bright red. And then, I lost my cursor again. Okay. And then it leaves the lungs and returns to the heart. Then here in the heart, it goes down and it's going to be pumped, a big strong pump to go out of the heart. This is called the aorta, and it's going to travel to the whole body. So obviously this loop is just symbolic. There'll be a particular loop which goes to your left ear, a particular loop which goes to the muscles of your legs, and so on, a particular loop which goes to your brain. But this is just representative. It's a schematic drawing. So all of the blood vessels going to all parts of your bodies are bright red, and they will eventually all break into capillary beds because that's how they're going to give off their oxygen. It's through these tiny blood vessels. Oxygen is given up and nourishes all the parts of your body, and then converges into bigger and bigger blood vessels until it returns as big veins, which return to the heart and starts to loop over again. So this is called pulmonary circuit because it's the loop which involves blood going to the lungs and becoming oxygenated. So the circuit of the lungs. And this is called systemic circuit. I guess you could think of it as our whole system. I don't know. Which involves oxygenated blood leaving the heart, going to the whole body and returning. Okay. And the oxygenated blood is always on the left side of the heart and deoxygenated on the right side of the heart. You should make a note that right and left, like always, are reversed in anatomical diagrams. Okay, these are the major organs that are really important to blood. So the first one is really easy. Why are the lungs so important to the blood? The lungs are the place where we get rid of CO2 and we gain oxygen. Why are the intestine and really the whole GI tract so important to the blood and also the liver? Well, so blood travels to the GI tract and does what? It picks up nutrients. It picks up the food that we need and all the nutrients that our cells need. And then before those nutrients get delivered to the whole body, they pass through the liver because the liver is going to detoxify. It's going to take away anything toxic or anything that was in excess of the food that we gained from the GI tract, of the nutrients we gained from the GI tract. Okay, so gives nutrients to the blood, takes toxins out or filters the blood. That's those two organs in this loop. Then there's one last loop set of organs that does something very important for the blood, and it's the kidneys. And we haven't studied the urinary system yet, so I'm just going to characterize the kidneys by saying they are another type of filtering. They filter to remove whatever is in excess, whatever there is too much of. And so they're maintaining correct concentration. Anything that is excessive will be removed. They also detoxify. There's certain toxins that get removed from the kidneys also, although less so than the liver. So here is a written summary. Just to be able to understand them all. These are obviously the lungs. Let's skip that on your worksheet. I whited that out actually. The double one. So blood is going in this direction, right? The loops, all in the bottom, below the heart, all the loops are going from right to left or clockwise. So here we go first here, then there. So I think you can figure out what it is. First, the blood goes to the GI tract. Then it gets filtered by the liver. So we have GI tract, liver. And then the last organ that we haven't mentioned yet that's important for the blood is the kidneys. It's filtered. So the kidneys. Oh dear, I wrote this on the board. I didn't write this on a slide. There's 3 adjectives you need to learn. Hepatic means of the liver. Renal means of the kidneys. And pulmonary means of the lungs. So that's important to know because all the blood vessels will be labeled this way. So for example, so sorry this keeps happening. My mouse keeps disappearing and I can't find it. This is a pulmonary artery. This is a pulmonary vein. This is the kidney here. This is a renal artery and a renal vein, and so on. Hepatic vein. This is a really important one. You learned it when we did digestive tract. Where do all the nutrients, how do they get carried to the liver to be filtered? Through the hepatic portal vein. So all those nutrients, before they get delivered to the heart for general circulation, they have to pass through the liver, through the hepatic portal vein. Okay, so I think those adjectives are worth learning. Oh, let me just note one more thing. Notice that arteries are all bright red, oxygenated blood, and veins are all blue, deoxygenated blood, with one exception. What's the exception? The pulmonary circuit, because that's where blood leaves the heart to become oxygenated. So the pulmonary artery is the only artery in your body that contains blue blood, deoxygenated blood, and the pulmonary vein is the only vein in your body that has oxygenated or bright red blood. Okay, let's look at the heart itself. So the heart is like a double pump. The major pumps are the right and left ventricle. The ventricles. So these are these 4 are chambers, and they're more or less cavities, holes in the heart. The actual heart tissue is this stuff here, this light pinkish stuff, and that's the muscular tissue of the heart. And these are valves that we'll talk about a little bit later, but these are really basically cavities. The 2 upper cavities are called atrium, right atrium, left atrium, and they are smaller, and they have only a little bit, I lost my mouse again. Okay, they have only a little bit of muscle, as you can see, a thin amount of muscle. So they're very light, delicate pumps. Their pumping is not very important. The big pumps are the ventricles, and you can see by their thick muscular walls. And again, notice that right and left are reversed. You have to imagine that the person whose heart this is, they are staring out of the screen or out of the page out at you. And so you have to reverse right and left always. Okay, the direction of flow, this is anatomically correct. This is not. This is just to show the direction of flow. So direction of flow is always going from atria to the ventricles, and then the ventricles take out to either the pulmonary circuit or the systemic circuit. So from blood enters in the atria, always enters the heart from the atria, goes down to the ventricles, and then exits from the ventricles out a major artery. Okay, so if we were to look at that up here, blood is entering here into the atrium and descending into the ventricle, and here it doesn't show the artery with which it leaves. And same thing here, blood is entering the atrium on the right side and going down to the ventricles. We're going to look at that in more detail. Okay, before we look at that in too much detail, I wanted you to become familiar with the major blood vessels. So, the really important blood vessels here are the blood, which is oxygenated, which is leaving the heart, is going to be leaving through this blood vessel here. It comes out right here. It does a U-turn. Before it does a U-turn, it branches off to the arms and the head. It does a U-turn, and then behind the heart it descends, and here it continues. This major artery with all the blood going to the entire body is called the aorta. Okay? By the way, this diagram is a little bit inaccurate. They make the aorta thicker here than they did up here. The aorta should be the widest here because it's got all the blood. It's going to contain all the blood going to the entire body. And it makes this funny U-turn. So on the other hand, if we look at the biggest veins are this one entering the heart from there, and this other one entering the heart from the lower body. And they both go behind the heart and enter the right atrium over here. And they're really called the same blood vessel. This is called the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. But the vena cava is the major blood vessel carrying all the blood that is returning to the heart. And all the blood that is exiting the heart is the aorta. And notice they have a slightly different mechanism. The vena cava has this coming from the upper body, coming from the lower body in two different parts. They both enter here. And the aorta instead does this U-turn. But they both achieve the same end of making it to the upper body and the lower body. Okay, so now we look in more detail at the heart itself. It starts to become a little bit complicated. We're going to really try to understand the pathway of blood throughout the heart. So we're going to start with blood that has just gone to the body. So maybe the blood up here has just gone to, I don't know, a shoulder muscle or to your brain. And it's returning to the heart, and it returns through the big large vein called the vena cava, and it enters your right atrium. If instead it was blood that was nourishing your legs or an organ in your lower body, it will be returning from this direction, going up, and it goes behind the heart and enters there. So in either case, whether blood has been in the upper body or the lower body, it enters the right atrium. So here's our blue deoxygenated blood entering the atrium. It descends into the ventricle, and from the ventricle, here's the major pump that gets pumped out. And it gets pumped out here. I should have drawn arrows on this. And this divides in two directions. Some of it goes over to the right. I'm sorry, I should say the left because we're reversing right and left. It goes over to the left lung. The other amount of blood gets sent in the other direction. Over here, goes behind the aorta, so it's hard to see, but it continues here, and it's going to the right lung. So this blood comes out of the heart, deoxygenated blood comes out of the heart, and immediately divides into right and left, going to one lung and to the other, okay? And this blood will go to the lung and get oxygenated, and look what it will do. It will return right here. In these blood vessels, it will return and enter in the right atrium. Same thing's going on over here. Blood has gone to the right lung. It will return and enter through these blood vessels, go behind all these tangle of blood vessels, and look what it's done. It has entered the left atrium. So here we have oxygenated blood, bright red, freshly oxygenated blood that just entered the left atrium. Of course, it's going to descend into the left ventricle. The left ventricle, lined with all these powerful muscles, is going to give a big, powerful pump that sends blood shooting out really hard and fast. It goes behind this blood vessel, so it's hard to see, but the blood goes behind the blood vessel into